Hello, everyone. Meteorologist Tim Schmidt here. We're going to talk about a storm system for next week. It's about a week away from Thanksgiving, and there are some signs in our computer model data, as you see here on the screen, that I do think could lead to maybe some winter weather impacts for Thanksgiving itself. Both the European model and the American computer forecast model are trying to give us some type of storm system next week that would be kind of around the time of Thanksgiving, around let's say Wednesday and into Thursday, and we'll see what happens. This is what the European model has, and it really defines a low pressure system very well, very deep low pressure system, if you will, a strong one too. But the GFS, the American model, is not really as pronounced with that just yet. Again, we're a week out. This is 192 hours out from the computer model. So it's not going to be super reliable. Anything outside of 144 hours or 7 days or 5 days or something like that is going to be a little bit non-reliable, especially this time of the year. So if you're seeing stuff on social media, unless it's from like a reliable source like myself, I wouldn't believe too much into the hype again. And even this is just something that we're kind of just watching for, especially with it being such a big travel day for many people around the United States. But these two computer forecasts are trying to build in some snow around Kansas and Missouri, some winter weather impacts. I'll cheat and show you what the precipitation type is from the American model, and you see snow out of this as it's going to be cold for the next few days, but the high pressure system associated with the cool down next week is going to still be in place up over the Dakotas and even into the Great Lakes, and that's what's going to allow for this moisture from the storm system to basically be kind of a rain and snow mix over much of Missouri, into Illinois, and even in parts of Kansas. But the European model is trying to make it basically all snow. So it is something that we are watching very closely. This is the air temperature at about 5,000 feet. It's 850 millibars, but it's at about 5,000 feet. And it does show, again, the European model is trying to make a very strong, very well organized storm system, whereas the American model, maybe not so much. The area of lower pressure, the storm system, it's very broad, it's very elongated. What we call cyclogenesis, really, it's not occurring in the storm system all the way. It does eventually happen, but it's more toward the East Coast by then. Whereas the European model wants this thing fully deepened by the time it even gets to Kansas City. All right, so this is going to be a big thing that I just want to watch, though, for is how much cold air is wrapping into the system or mixing in with the system. Typically on something like what the American model is having with this, in my experience, these are going to be just stretches of snowfall, especially in Kansas, where several inches of snow could be possible. You think of stretches of the interstate like I-70 from Kansas City all the way out to Denver. Probably will have some snow impacts with it. Some gusty winds, but if the storm system isn't fully developed yet, the wind is not going to be as strong. Whereas with the European model, this thing wants to be fully developed by the time it's toward Kansas City. And so we could be looking at significant wind impacts along with the snow too. The temperature at 5,000 feet would be about -5 Celsius. So what is that like it's approaching 15 or 20 degrees Fahrenheit at 5,000 feet. So this will be easily producing some snow by the time we get into Thursday if the European model does verify with this. Maybe even some thunderstorms mixed in with it too, depending on how much mixing of warm air in with the cold air too. But that is something I want to just continue to watch for. This is not uncommon to see stuff like this. We are kind of in a pseudo La Nina. It's not official that we're in La Nina, but go ahead and just go with me on that because while it's not official, we have been seeing some impacts. But this is something that I created a while back, but it's the average temperature profile over every La Nina that we've had. And so going forward, really, we're coming out of very warm conditions over the fall. And if you're wondering like, man, it was just really warm this fall. Well, it's because we were in kind of a La Nina, essentially. Even though it's not officially developed, the La Nina effects have been felt here in the United States because of this. So, on average, we're typically warmer over October and November, and so far that's been the case. It's actually been very warm here in Nebraska, where I live, here in Omaha. It's been quite warm, but that's going to be the case heading into December. The opposite will be the case. December, on average, with La Nina, is cooler than average. I'll just kind of scroll up, and most La Ninas, I think there's 23 or 25 of them to count. Yeah, most of these are cooler than average. Okay, and that's going to be for Omaha specifically, so kind of in the center of where the Midwest and the Plain states kind of converge, that sort of thing. But comparing and contrasting to what we had last year when we were in El Nino. El Nino is typically very warm here in Omaha during December. And what do you know? I believe and I think this is the stat from it. We were 6.4 degrees above average here in Omaha last December. Whereas January, if you lived in the Midwest, last January was really cold, especially the first 2 weeks of January were. And we had a little bit of snow out of that too. But that's going to be essentially the opposite as we get into La Nina. La Nina is typically going to be a little colder in December and then a little bit warmer in January. So it's almost the complete opposite. Here's the model predictions. This is from Columbia University. I love this website. I love this page because I think it shows it really well what the ENSO prediction is right here, the El Nino or La Nina prediction. And right now, the water temperatures out in the equatorial Pacific are a little bit cooler, definitely cooler than what it was last year at this time when we were fully engaged into an El Nino. Now we're in kind of a neutral, cool ENSO pattern. We're getting close. We need 5 consecutive months of 0.5 or negative 0.5 or colder to be able to officially be in La Nina. And we might get to it, but it's going to be close. And some of the model consensus is trying to keep us on kind of that near neutral, not quite El Nino heading into next year, but we'll see what happens with it. But originally, my forecast that I had made, I have all kinds of notes here. I was thinking maybe a little bit more of a neutral pattern for us, but it does really look like we're going to probably be more La Nina going forward. What does that mean? Well, typically speaking, La Ninas have right at about average amounts of snowfall for the Midwest, maybe slightly lower. Just the sum of the departures are a little bit lower. Every now and then, if the system works just right, there's typically enough cold air in place in December to force up some snowfall. But we'll see what happens with that. Typically, our winters are going to be a little cold in December, a little bit warmer in January, and then kind of right on average for February. February, we sometimes run into a bit of snowfall. Now, here in Omaha, for December, we typically get about 5 inches of snow, and I think we should probably expect at least that, if not maybe a little bit more. I do think December could be a snowy month, especially the first half of December, and I'm eyeing something close to maybe like, I don't know, around New Year's, let's say, where we'd probably see another run-in of snow. Sometimes in January's you can get some snowfalls. Sometimes we get some big snowfalls in January. It just depends on how cold it is and how wet the pattern is. February can sometimes have quite a bit of snow. So sometimes we'll want to watch for that. I really look, though, for March. I think March is going to be a month where we could see quite a bit of snow kind of on the back end of the winter season before we get fully into the spring season by then. And if you're just curious on what the neutral phase is, so that in-between phase on if it's El Nino or La Nina, it doesn't know what it wants to be. Well, on average, actually, it's just cold the whole year long. So that's kind of what I was initially thinking this winter would be like, especially here for the Midwest and Central Plains. Again, centered for Omaha, Nebraska, but you can kind of use this data interchangeably for some areas in Iowa, Missouri, even into the Dakotas. But typically, it's just cold for most of the winter, but there's also not much snow at all. Actually, your snowfall numbers are quite low, lower than average, and the sum of the departures, the sum of those averages, are quite low. So that I think is really, really interesting. Again, La Nina kind of right at about average. And then if the data serves me right, I think we're a little bit above on snowfall when we have an El Nino. Sometimes it's a little different, but it just depends. I don't think I had that built out all the way. So anyway, that's what we're looking at for next week. The temperature pattern going forward looks pretty cold, at least for the next 5 to 7 days, especially getting into the first few days of December. I mean, this is what the computer model wants. Again, anything outside of this 144 timestamp, which would be like Tuesday, November 26th, as of the time I'm recording this, take it with a grain of salt. These computer models are not perfect. They're significantly not perfect, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens. In the European model, it got an update, and I just don't really think it's a great update personally, but we'll see what happens. I mean, the model wants some cooler weather, let's say, heading into the first couple of days of December. So anyway, check back for some more updates here. We'll continue to monitor this as we could maybe see some winter weather impacts for Thanksgiving week, specifically Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of Thanksgiving week around Missouri and Kansas.